The Grass Harp, from Wikipedia, the free online encyclopedia at wikipedia.org. The Grass Harp is a novel by Truman Capote published on October 1st, 1951. It tells the story of an orphaned boy and two elderly ladies who observe life from a tree. They eventually leave their temporary retreat to make amends with each other and other members of society. Conception. Not wanting to take up his incomplete first novel, Summer Crossing, Capote began writing The Grass Harp in June 1950 and completed it on May 27, 1951. The novel was inspired by memories of his Alabama childhood, specifically a treehouse constructed in the 1930s in a large walnut tree in his cousin Jenny's backyard. This large treehouse, accessible by an antique spiral staircase, featured cypress wood construction and a tin roof, and was furnished with a rattan sofa. Capote spent time in this treehouse with his cousin Sook or other childhood friends such as Nell Harper Lee. The novel was additionally inspired by his cousin Sook's dropsy medicine, which she made yearly until the age of 62. She took the recipe for it to the grave, despite Jenny's wanting first to patent the recipe and then to sell it to a manufacturer. Capote completed The Grass Harp while he was vacationing in Taormina, Sicily. The last section was airmailed to the publisher's Random House just days after he finished writing it, but it was not published for 4 months because the editors, specifically Bob Linscott, did not care for the ending of the novel. Linscott thought that the ending was weak because, once the characters were up in the treehouse, Capote, quote, didn't know what to do with them. He asked Capote to rewrite the ending, and Capote made some changes in it, but he did not completely rewrite it. Truman Capote initially wanted to title the novel Music of the Sawgrass. It was Bob Linscott who gave it the title The Grass Harp. Plot summary. The story begins with Colin Fenwick losing his mother, and then his father, and moving in with his aunts Dolly and Verena. His aunts have a servant named Catherine, who also lives in the house and gets along, for the most part, only with Dolly. Dolly is famous for her medicine, which she makes by going out into the woods with Catherine and Colin and randomly picking plants. They then got to an old treehouse which is propped up in a chinaberry tree. One day, after Dolly has an argument with Verena wants to mass-produce Dolly's medicine, Dolly, Colin, and Catherine leave their home and start walking. They go to the treehouse in the chinaberry tree and decide to camp out there. Verena, meanwhile, informs the sheriff of her sister's disappearance. The sheriff organizes a search party and eventually arrests Catherine. During the course of the novel, others come to live in the treehouse, such as Judge Cool and Riley Henderson. In a climactic event, a confrontation among the search party and the residents of the treehouse leads to Riley getting shot in the shoulder. After Judge Cool discusses the situation, everyone agrees that it was a pointless struggle and old relationships are invigorated once again. Many people leave as friends. The story ends with how a grass harp, gathering, telling, a harp of voices, remembering a story. Characters. Colin Fenwick, an orphaned boy who takes up residence in a china tree with Dolly. When the story opens, he is 11 years old, but he is 16 years old for the majority of the narrative. He is small for his age. Colin serves as both the protagonist and narrator of the novel. Dolly Talbot, aunt of Colin. She takes up residence in the china tree. Her character is based on Truman's older cousin, Sook Falk. Verena Talbot, Dolly's sister. She urges the sheriff of the town to investigate the disappearance of her sister, Dolly. Morris Ritz, a man who woos Verena and is popularly believed to open a factory with her, but soon runs away with her money. Catherine Creek, an African-American servant who runs away with Dolly and Colin and also takes up residence in the china tree. Riley Henderson, a boy who becomes friends with Colin. He briefly takes up residence in the treehouse of the china tree. Junius Candle, the town sheriff. He is persistent in finding perpetrators and organizes a massive search party to find Colin and Dolly. Judge Cool. He is considered the free thinker of the town and helps Dolly and Verena come to terms with one another. He is the wise man of society and, in general, solves conflicts posed in the novella. Reception and critical analysis. The New York Herald Tribune lauded the novel as, quote, remarkable, infused with a tender laughter, charming human warmth, and a feeling for the positive quality of life, end quote. The Atlantic Monthly commented that, quote, the Grass Harp charms you into sharing the author's feeling that there is a special poetry, a spontaneity and wonder and delight in lives untarnished by conformity and common sense, end quote. Sales of The Grass Harp reached 13,500, more than double those of either A Tree of Night or Local Color, two of Capote's prior works. The Grass Harp was Truman Capote's favorite personal work, despite that it was critiqued as being overly sentimental. Adaptations. Play. The Grass Harp was favorably reviewed when it was published, and it attracted the interest of the Broadway producer Saint Suber, who traveled to Taormina to urge Capote to write a stage adaptation of the work. His offer opened up new possibilities for income at a time when Capote was still struggling to make his way. Working with intense concentration, Capote managed to complete a draft of the play in a year's time. He was personally involved in the selection of a production team. Capote's stage adaptation of his novel, produced by Saint Suber, directed by Robert Lewis, opened on March 27, 1952, at Broadway's Martin Beck Theatre, where it ran for 36 performances. The cast included Mildred Natwick as Dolly Talbot, Ruth Nelson as Verena Talbot, Jonathan Harris as Dr. Moritz Ritz, Sterling Holloway as the barber, Gertrude Flynn as the baker's wife, Val Dufour as the sheriff, Jane Lawrence as the choir mistress, Lenka Peterson as Maud Reardon, and Alice Pierce as Miss Babylove Dallas. Music was by Virgil Thompson, and scenery and costumes were by Cecil Beaton. Musical. In October 1971, the Michigan University Professional Theater Program presented the Grass Harp musical, with the university's music and drama departments supplying musicians and performers. Initially as an evaluation by the Broadway producers Richard Barr, Charles Woodward, Michael Harvey, and associate producer Michael Kasdan, Celeste Holm, a close friend of Clabe Richardson, appeared in the Michigan University Professional Program's production as Miss Baby Love. She was replaced with Karen Morrow for the Broadway production. The musical adaptation opened on Broadway at the Martin Beck Theatre on November 2, 1971, after previews from October 26, 1971, and closed on November 6, 1971. The book and lyrics were by Kenward Elmsley, and the music was by Clabe Richardson. Directed by Ellis Rabb, the choreography was by Rhoda Levine, scenic design and lighting by James Tilton, and costumes by Nancy Potts. Orchestrations were by Jonathan Tunick and Robert Russell Bennett. Theodore Seidenberg was musical director. Musical arrangements were by J. Billy Van Plank, and dance and incidental music was by John Berkman. The cast featured Barbara Cook as Dolly Talbot, Carol Bryce as Catherine Creek, Karen Morrow as Evangelist Miss Baby Love, Ruth Ford as Verena Talbot, Russ Thacker as Colin Talbot, Max Showalter as Dr. Moritz Ritz, John Baragray as Judge Cool, Kelly Boa, Trudy Bordoff, Colin Duffy, Eva Grant, and David Craig Moskin as Miss Baby Love's orphans, known as the Heavenly Pride and Joy, Christine Stabile as Maud Reardon, and Harvey Vernon as Sheriff Amos LeGrand. The musical previewed and opened during a major New York City newspaper strike preventing advertising and reviews, with no advance theater party ticket sales guarantee. Richard Barr, Charles Woodward, Michael Harvey, and Michael Kasdan gave the company the option of maintaining 3 more weeks for the production's performance schedule, or closing after only 7 performances, using the show's banked funds to produce a Broadway cast album. The musical orchestration was recorded in Cologne, Germany, with the Cologne Symphonic Orchestra Ensemble. Returning to the States, the original cast was recorded in New York City, with the Painted Smiles Grass Harp vinyl album released a year after the musical's closing date. Because of timing, one musical number was forced off the vinyl, but added when the Painted Smiles Grass Harp audio CD was released. The Grass Harp album cover art was designed by Kenward Elmsley's fine artist painter friend Joe Brainerd. Clabe Richardson's advertising agency art director designer friend Jim Pearsall designed the Chapel Music Publishing's sheet music design cover artwork. Pearsall's Twisted Chinaberry Treehouse design, the Chapel Music Publishing sheet music cover art, replaced the original Brainerd vinyl record Grass Harp cover artwork when the Painted Smiles audio CD was issued. Initially, criticism of the show's sound system caused problems, with Truman Capote declaring, "Mic it." The producers could not afford to mic each member of the ensemble. The Grass Harp production was the last musical presented on Broadway without microphones for the cast. The scenic designer had incorporated burlap fabric in the production's wing and border designs, causing the deadening of the performers' vocal projections. This poor choice of stage material in the set's design, with the absence of microphones for each cast member, especially the children, was the one major technical problem for the producers. Barbara Cook and the cast appeared on a CBS television Sunday morning talk interview show, presenting several of the musical numbers with Richardson at the grand piano during the musical's preview week and opening night performances. The initial 1967 tryout of the musical was performed by Trinity Square Repertory Company at the Rhode Island School of Design Auditorium in Providence, Rhode Island. Directed and staged by Adrian Hall, the cast included Barbara Baxley as Dolly Hart Talbot, Carol Bryce as the black maid Catherine Creek, Carol Bruce as Verena Talbot, Elaine Stritch as the evangelist Baby Love. After the Providence tryout, Larry Feinberg optioned the property for Broadway, casting Mama Cass as the evangelist Miss Baby Love. However, Feinberg was unable to raise capital funds, and the producing rights were optioned by Richard Barr. Film. In 1995, Sterling Siliphant and Kirk Ellis adapted the novel for a feature film directed by Charles Mathew. The cast included Mathew's father, Walter, Piper Laurie, Sissy Spacek, Edward Furlong, Nell Carter, Jack Lemmon, Mary Steenburgen, Sean Patrick Flannery, Joe Don Baker, Bonnie Bartlett, and Charles Durning. This article was recorded on August 20th, 2019.